I've been working nights at the local hospital for years, the kind of shift where the world outside is asleep, and the building takes on a different energy. You get used to the quiet. You get used to the way the halls seem to stretch out, like time itself slows down after hours. But the things that come through the doors are different. People only come to the hospital at night when something's gone wrong. That night, I was in the ER when they brought her in. Mrs. Harper, they said. The paramedics didn't have much detail, just that she was old and had collapsed at home, had gone into shock. They'd tried to stabilize her on the way in, but she was still a mess. Her vitals were all over the place, racing heart, labored breathing. It wasn't uncommon for people in shock to act strange, but this wasn't just shock. Something felt wrong. I was the one doing the initial assessment, checking her vitals, trying to make sense of the data before the doctor took over. Her skin was pale, like she hadn't seen the sun in years, and she trembled. But it wasn't a normal tremble. It was like her body was fighting against itself, fighting against the monitors that beeped around her. She wasn't just disoriented, she was saying things, words I couldn't make sense of. They weren't English, not even close. I had been trained for a lot of things in the ER, but this was something else. I looked up at her husband, Mr. Harper, as we worked. He wasn't upset. Not the way you'd expect someone to be in this kind of situation. His eyes were fixed on his wife, but he didn't seem to panic. He didn't ask questions. He didn't seem shocked. He just stood there quiet, like he had seen this before. Oh, we worked fast, running through the usual procedures, oxygen, fluids, medications to slow her heart rate. But nothing helped. Her condition only worsened. It was like her body was rejecting everything we did. She wasn't responding to anything, and in a matter of minutes, her heart rate spiked and then suddenly dropped. I watched the monitor as the numbers flatlined. It was over. Everyone rushed in to check again, but it was clear. She was gone. I remember the stillness that followed, the quiet that settled over the room. You expect it, but it never feels normal. I glanced back at Mr. Harper. He didn't move. He didn't say anything. He didn't even seem surprised. It was almost as though he had been waiting for this. After a moment, he asked if he could be alone with her, and we all filed out, leaving him in that sterile white room. Her body was taken down to the morgue. It was just another patient, just another death. But as I went through the motions of finishing my shift, I couldn't stop thinking about how odd it all was. The way Mr. Harper stood there, the way he didn't react the way anyone else would, the way she was saying words in some unknown language. It all stuck with me longer than I expected. Several months later, I moved into a new house. Same city, same town. I wasn't running from anything, I just needed a change. The place was bigger, a bit quieter, and I was looking forward to a fresh start. I hadn't thought much about the Harpers or that night at the hospital. But when I moved in, I couldn't help but notice how close my new place was to the house next door. It was an older house, 2 stories, with a worn-out yard and trees that had seen better days. It didn't stand out. Just the kind of place you'd pass by without thinking twice. But when I came home from my first night shift in the new house, something felt wrong. It wasn't anything obvious, but as I settled into my routine, I constantly had the sense of being watched. Maybe it was just the exhaustion from the long shift, or maybe it was the way the house creaked in the quiet. But I started to notice things. Every so often, I'd glance up at the neighbor's window. It wasn't like I was looking for anything, just passing by, maybe catching a glimpse of movement. The first few times, I thought it was my eyes playing tricks on me, but after a while, I started to wonder. Every once in a while, I thought I saw a figure standing in the upstairs window, just barely visible through the blinds. It wasn't enough to make a scene out of, but it bothered me. There was something about it that creeped me out. It wasn't just that. The first few nights I spent in the new house, I could hear things, muffled sounds, like someone crying in the distance. I told myself it was the house settling, the usual creaks and groans that came with an old place, but the sounds remained. I started to hear them on the nights I wasn't working, when the house was quiet and still. I told myself it was the wind, or the house itself making noise. But I knew that wasn't it. Those were just cliché things to say so I can distract myself. I tried to push it all out of my mind. I had enough on my plate with the new place and adjusting to the night shifts. But every time I passed the neighbor's house, or every time I heard those sounds, I couldn't help but feel like something was there, watching me. The house next door, Mr. Harper's, was just close enough that it kept me aware of its presence. I tried not to notice it, but the windows on the second floor would sometimes catch my attention. The blinds always pulled tightly, but enough of a gap for a glimpse of something darker behind them. I told myself it was nothing. The kind of thing you see in passing, like shadows in the corner of your eye. But after a few days, I began noticing it more often. The way those blinds would shift, just slightly. I had seen the house enough to know there was no breeze that would make the blinds move like that. It wasn't the movement of a curtain, it was intentional. I had been working nights for so long that I was used to the strange rhythms of the world around me, the silence, the darkness. But this felt different. Not overwhelming, not alarming, just present. A quiet presence that didn't belong. I couldn't sleep after one of my shifts. My body had grown used to being awake at odd hours, so it wasn't surprising that I lay in bed, the sound of my own breath the loudest thing in the room. But after a while, I noticed something else. A rustling, soft but clear enough that I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't place the sound at first. It wasn't the house settling. I knew that sound. This was something else. I sat up in bed, listening, but it stopped almost as soon as I moved. I told myself it was nothing, just the usual creaks, settling sounds of an old house. Yes, I know I keep saying this, but what else am I supposed to tell myself? Days passed, and nothing changed. I tried not to think about it, but the moments lingered. The blinds in Mr. Harper's house, the feeling of being watched that wasn't there but still was. It was like being in the room with someone without them ever saying a word. The house was empty, but I felt like I wasn't alone in it. The days went fast in the new house. I tried to stay busy with work, but something about the place kept nagging at me. It wasn't like the house was falling apart or anything, just old. A little worn around the edges, but nothing out of the ordinary. Still, the quiet was starting to eat at me. Not in the way a peaceful silence should, but like the house was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. There were times I'd wake up from a deep sleep, my heart racing, drenched in sweat. The dreams were never the same, but they always felt connected. In one, I was standing outside, staring at the neighbor's house. The windows were open, and I could hear a woman's voice, soft, almost melodic. But it was wrong. The words didn't make sense, like they were in a language I couldn't understand. The windows creaked open, and the voice got louder, closer. I'd try to run, but my feet felt like they were stuck in mud, heavy and slow. I'd turned to look back, but the figure was already in the window, watching me, motionless. Other nights, the dreams were darker. I'd be walking through the house, the lights flickering as I moved from room to room. Every door I opened led to another hallway, another door. No matter where I went, I couldn't escape. The house felt endless, the walls closing in. And then, in the back of my mind, I'd hear the rustling of movement. The unmistakable sound of someone following behind me. Each time I woke up from one of these dreams, it took me a moment to adjust to reality, The room would still be dark, quiet. I'd sit up, take a deep breath, and try to tell myself it was just the stress, the exhaustion. But even as the nights passed, the dreams didn't stop. They only became more vivid. I didn't want to acknowledge it. I didn't want to admit that something was off, but the dreams, the strange sensations that followed me from room to room, wouldn't let me pretend it was all just in my head. I tried to ignore it for as long as I could, the odd feeling that clung to the house, the movement in the neighbor's window that didn't seem right. But it was harder to block out after the nightmares kept coming, each one more vivid than the last. The dreams bled into my waking hours. I started seeing things more clearly. A figure in the corner of my eye, the sound of footsteps in rooms I hadn't even entered. After a few days, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I found myself standing in front of the Harper's house one afternoon, just staring at the windows. I wasn't sure why I felt compelled to look. It was more than just idle curiosity. There was something about the house, something that kept pulling me in. I couldn't explain it, but the strange sense of being watched was there again, stronger than before. I wasn't planning to knock on the door, but somehow that's exactly what I did. I don't know if it was the silence of the house or something else. Maybe I thought it would help to finally meet the man who lived there. I didn't know much about Mr. Harper, except that he'd been a quiet figure when I saw him around. The man next door, always there, but never a presence I could fully define. I knocked 3 times, my hand hesitant against the weathered wood. It took a moment, but the door slowly opened. The old man stood there, taller than I expected, his face lined with years of something I couldn't name. He looked at me, not surprised, but not welcoming either. His eyes were too steady for someone answering the door to a stranger. "You're the new neighbor, I suppose," he said, his voice dry, like he'd been waiting for me. I nodded, and he stepped aside to let me in. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but the house smelled musty, like it had been closed up for too long. It wasn't much different from mine, just older. The walls were covered in dark wood paneling, and the furniture was old, well-worn, like it had been there for decades. Mr. Harper led me into the living room and gestured for me to sit. There was an oddness in the air, a strange tension in the stillness of the room. "You're still getting settled, I assume," he said, pouring a drink into an old glass. I nodded again. The conversation was simple enough, about the weather, about the neighborhood. But the more he spoke, the more I realized there was something unsettling about the way he talked. Something measured in his words, like he was testing me, watching for a reaction. I found myself glancing around the room, my eyes drawn to a portrait hanging on the far wall. The woman in the portrait looked familiar, her face pale, her eyes distant. It didn't take me long to realize who she was. Mrs. Harper, the woman from the hospital, the woman who had died, whose husband hadn't seemed to flinch when it happened. I froze, staring at the portrait. Mr. Harper caught my gaze, and for the first time, his expression changed. It wasn't a smile, not even a frown. It was something between recognition and something darker. He didn't say anything at first, just studied me as though he already knew what I was thinking. "You saw her, didn't you?" he finally asked. I didn't answer right away. What could I say? I had seen her. I had seen something in the window, but what did that mean? What was I supposed to say to someone who seemed to know exactly what I was thinking? The room seemed to shrink as I sat there, and I felt suddenly very aware of the distance between us. I wasn't sure if I should leave or if I should stay and ask questions, but I was stuck, caught between my instinct to get out and the urge to understand what was going on. "You've seen her just as I said," Mr. Harper repeated, his voice quieter now. There was something unnerving in the way he said it. "She's here, in a way. And she's not going anywhere. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't want to ask what he meant, but I couldn't stop myself. "Why are you telling me this?" I managed to ask. It was a question I shouldn't have asked, not with everything that had already happened, but I couldn't help it. Mr. Harper took a long drink from his glass, his eyes never leaving mine. "Because, son," he said slowly, "sometimes things don't stay gone. Not everything dies when it should." The weight of his words hit me all at once. I didn't know if I wanted to stay for more, or if I wanted to run out the door and never come back. But as I sat there, the silence stretched longer than I was comfortable with, and I realized I was no longer just a neighbor. I was part of something I didn't understand. "I'm going to give it to you straight. If you can see her, then that means you're special. Special in a way that would be fitting for us." "Special? What do you mean by that? Who's us?" I asked. Mr. Harper didn't respond right away. Instead, he just stared me down for a minute until he finally spoke and mentioned that he's in an ancient cult. He talked about how it can give me power, how I can use the dead to my benefit, all kinds of things that I just wasn't ready to hear. It was all so overwhelming and sudden that I just got up and left. I didn't acknowledge him. I didn't say goodbye. I just left. Days passed, and I began to look up at the window again. Only now I started to see two silhouettes just behind the blinds with sharp eyes watching me. I snapped my head back so fast and rushed into my home. I locked my door and sat at it, trying to comprehend what was going on. Can I actually see the dead? I've seen things at the hospital, but nothing ever like this. I decided I needed some kind of safe space for myself. A space to get away and just focus on other things. So over the week, I began to renovate the basement. When I was painting the walls, I noticed a very subtle outline. The best way I can explain it was that it was like a very unnoticeable indentation that blended into the wall like camouflage. I pressed on it, and a door opened just enough where I could barely grab it with my fingertips and pull it open. How did no one know about this? Why was it never mentioned when I moved in? I had to know what was behind it, what it led to. When I pulled the door open, wind came rushing out, smelling stale, and inside was just a straight tunnel. I couldn't see, so I turned the flash on my phone and walked down. Not even a minute in, and I came to another door. It had the same mechanism as the one I opened, except now I'm behind it. I opened the door, and it was another basement. Wait a sec, I think I'm below Mr. Harper's house. The thought of all this terrified me. He actually is in a cult. Why else would there be some secret tunnel? The previous owner must have been involved. They must have been meeting in secret. Before I could explore more and try to figure out what the hell was going on, I heard the door to the basement open. I panicked, rushing back to the tunnel. I closed his door and started running back as fast as I could. I closed my side and tried to find something to barricade that hidden door, but I had nothing. So I ran back up the basement stairs. I locked every door, every window, and barricaded myself in my bedroom. I was up for hours just listening in the silence, but there was nothing. Was I being paranoid? Just because someone says they're in a cult doesn't mean they're bad, right? The exhaustion of all this eventually got to me, and I fell asleep. Moments later, I woke up to someone talking to me. It was Mr. Harper. He was standing above me with a rag in his hand and a knife in the other. You should have joined, son. You think I would tell you all my secrets and not do anything about it? I'm sorry, please don't do this. I swear I won't tell anyone. His expression didn't change, and he spoke one last time. I'm afraid it's too late for that. Say hi to my wife for me.